This is Keyed In with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In podcast. I'm Max Rabin.
And I am Brent Jackson.
So today we have Jamie Manning back on the show. Jamie Manning has been on the show 3 times. Jamie Manning is the proprietor of Exposed Brick DC, the hottest real estate blog in DC, and I don't know, everywhere. I mean,
Everywhere.
That's right.
It's nice of you guys to say.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So we're just going to have kind of, I guess, a roundtable discussion of the topics of the day.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
We are going to be on the spot.
Yeah. You can put us on the spot.
Okay.
You know, you can ask us what we think about things. You're a seasoned veteran on the show, so you know how it goes.
Okay, cool.
So just starting right off, why don't you tell us how things are going with your blog right now?
Things are going really well. I definitely have seen like a little bit of slowdown in growth, which, of course I like to blame the Instagram algorithm, but I don't really know what it was. I think that this summer they were really pushing Reels, and that's become less of a thing. I've actually seen like some few people talking recently about how carousel posts on Instagram are doing better than Reels right now, which is so
Can you explain to the
Tell us carousel. So a carousel post is where you post multiple pictures and
Yes,
right.
Yes, and so then you can swipe. So like those are the kind of posts that I do if I'm not doing a reel.
Okay.
And I've noticed the engagement on those are a lot better. So I don't know if Instagram has decided like, okay, we need to get a little bit more back to our roots and go back to photos. But it's been interesting, and just in the last month or so, I've seen more engagement with the static than the reels.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when did everything slow down? I'm just curious if it's also timing with something, because a market going sideways or backwards. Was it during the summer or was it after Labor Day? It
was more after Labor Day, which I do think you're right. There's probably the shift probably coincided with rates going up, because I think that people are feeling a little bit more discouraged, and it might not be as fun to look at real estate right now because you're thinking about how much it's going to cost you. Where like this summer, well, when rates were still pretty low, I feel like there was still this frenzy of like, oh my gosh, this is my chance. Like I want to get in. And now people are feeling a little bit more deterred.
I'd say I'm always fascinated by like the herd mentality of markets in general, and real estate market is not immune to that, right? So when something, and I think that goes for a lot of things in general. Whenever anything is trending, especially given the amount of social media and the way media is in general now, when something's trending, it is literally trending.
Yes.
And then when it is not, it is not.
Yeah.
And real estate was, with the low interest rates and the insane multiple offers of the
COVID market.
Yeah, the COVID market, that it was super trendy.
Yeah, it was trendy. It was dramatic.
Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, I think people are always going to be interested in real estate and want to just look. Like so many people are like, I have a Redfin problem. Like I go on Redfin way too much. And there are things that I post that I'm never sure how it's going to perform. Like I posted that $1.5 million 1-bedroom condo in Kalorama a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this is a total, farce. Nobody's going to really want to look at this. But then people were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So people still like to look at like the outrageous stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And real estate is always sort of, it's on people's minds. We know this from our doing this business for so long. It's always an easy topic of conversation with people.
It's traffic in real estate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So on this topic of trending, through the different interactions you have with people on your Instagram and your blog, what's on people's minds right now? Are people still asking the same kind of questions to you, or has it dropped off, or are they asking new types of questions?
Yeah, so it was interesting. I actually, somebody sent me a DM last night, surprised because I posted a 3-bedroom house in Petworth for like $775, and he was like, "Wow, I bought a 2-bedroom condo in Petworth for the same price a year ago." And he lives in, I guess, a townhouse that was converted into 3 units. And so he's been talking to all of his neighbors, and they're all like, wow, we're not going to be able to sell for a really long time. And so I think there's going to be this sort of unique shift where people are going to maybe grow out of their spaces, but not sell them and try to rent them. And then those people are going to rent their next place. which, so that's kind of what we were talking about, which I was like, that is interesting.
Yeah. On like a statistical topic, and everything is momentary, but I am bringing on some new condos in 16th Street Heights.
Is this a pitch?
Yeah, it's a pitch. For sure, it's a pitch. Buy these condos. But I was talking to the developer, and I said I just went and looked at some other new units, like very close by. Quite frankly, the units that I went to go look at were on a better block, I thought, and they were really nice. And they had 7 units to sell there. And I sent the pictures and a video to my client. I was like, take a look at these. And I told him what the prices were, and he straight up said to me, he's like, yeah, I would buy that instead of what we're about to sell. And I said, yeah, I mean this. And I said, guess what? There's 70 other condos in this price range in the market within 1 mile.
Oh my gosh.
Within 1 mile.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how hard it is to be a developer right now, because obviously these projects take time, and there's been a major shift.
Jamie, this project that they have put together, it's just a converted row house. It took 3 years to get the permits.
Wow. Yeah,
so
a lot has changed.
A lot has changed.
Yeah.
To your point, though, I do think, because we're hearing a lot within our own team and our sellers, that as the market shifts, in general, sellers aren't willing to, and they've got a lot of equity in the homes, the sellers that we're working with now. So they're not forced to sell. Right. And they have started to pivot. Let's put it on for rent too and see what happens. It could be a $400,000 one bedroom. It could be a $3 million house here in DuPont Circle, but they're all pivoting their mindset to let's just rent for the next 2 years. And then we'll reconsider this in 24 or 25 when the markets should be better.
Right. Because I think there were a lot of people during COVID who maybe didn't necessarily have to move, but they saw opportunity and they're like, okay, this is my chance to get in the market. Where now there are a lot of people saying like, okay, if I don't absolutely have to move, I'm not going to.
Yeah. And on the rental topic, I've had some of my would-be sellers completely pivot to just renting their places out. And that's going with mixed results too.
Oh, interesting.
I had a rental townhouse on the market recently that I thought for sure would be just taken, even they would have rented to a group or whatever. It's, it was just the size of house that it was and nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. Whatever. It's just sort of
overpriced? Or
no, not necessarily. I mean, of course, price can solve anything, but I don't think the price was really that much of a factor. It's also time of year can affect rentals too for certain locations. But yeah, it's just, it's a little dicey for some properties right now. And I think we'll all agree on that.
So what are you saying to your client that calls and asks that question? Like, my place has been on the market for 3 months. I've had 2 showings in the last 30 days. I'm thinking about renting. What is your response?
My response is you have to think about what your ultimate goal with the property really is. And if you think that when people say I want to rent out my property, do they know what that really means? It's not, you're not just renting it out and collecting a check. There's maintenance. There is, what's up with rentals.
Right.
First of all, it's finding the tenant.
Yeah.
Getting that whole process done. Doing the back and forth and learning more about the personality of like whoever is coming in here. Getting them set up in there. Dealing with the day-to-day BS of being a landlord. Then a year from now, 2 years from now, what if they still want to remain in the property? And then you're thinking like, I definitely want to sell this. I'm either relocating or I suddenly have a larger family. I have a baby or another kid on the way, and we need to sell that property and get some equity out of it. Is the tenant just going to move out? Yeah. I mean, we know in DC that those things are not, they're not totally transparent. So that's a conversation I have.
And we can also speak from experience because we've been in the business long enough. To that point, you want to share with them the goods and the bads. On the bads, we've seen on a few occasions where we scrub the application, doctor making good money well into almost 7 figures, credit score of 800 plus, and then they leave the place and it's a ramsack. There was one that we rented in West End, and I'd never seen anything like it, but the guy had broke every window in the unit, and it had floor to ceiling, wall to wall windows walking out to a terrace. He had graffitied the door, took off all the doors on the cabinets, literally destroyed the unit. But that's a situation where going into it, you never would have known.
It-
But now that owner had to put in $25,000 just to recoup the cost that the tenant destroyed, and the tenant was like done. Like, we're gonna sue the guy after in the small claims court.
Absolutely. But being a landlord, as soon as you make that decision, you have to know what that entails and the potential of that. I would say for the most part, like my personal landlording experience over the years has been generally like majority good. I probably had a few tenants where I was like, what a that was a pain in the ass, and
Right.
that like a drag on my livelihood. But for the most part, it's been okay. Most people, but I'm in the business, you know, and I have resources. For the most part, like the average independent landlord thinking like, well, the market's not great. I'm just going to rent my house out. They don't know all that stuff,
That's a good point.
you know?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get into that line of business either. If you think like, I want to become a landlord, I want to buy investment property, I can handle this. Sure, go for it. Just, you know, do some research, know a little bit more about what that entails.
Right. Yeah. This might segue nicely into that conversation that I was having with two different real estate agents. So this was 2 weekends ago. I was at open houses and kind of talking about there are a lot of people who are, I guess, are in a similar phase of life as I am, where they're thinking, okay, do I buy a condo that maybe I can live in for 5 years, but I know I'm going to outgrow, but do that, try to build some equity, and then sell it or rent it, and then buy something bigger? Or do I continue to rent for the next 5 years, or maybe not 5 years, but next couple of years, continue to save and then buy the house that I think I'm going to be in for 10 or 15 years? So I posed that question to two different agents on the same day, and they said opposite things. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like
That's a great question for us.
No,
Yeah.
I think I want
You take it first.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
I can take it first.
Okay, so the question is, first time buyer or like any buyer?
Sure.
Okay,
Either
and
way,
they want
yeah.
to buy. They're thinking of buying a condo as a stepping stone to the larger property, versus renting for a short period. Or what's our period of time again? 2 years.
Let's say you're gonna buy a condo, be in there 5 years, and then buy a house, or you're gonna rent for 2 years
Okay.
and then buy a big house.
So it's so situational. And when we think about markets in general, we must consider time. Okay. Time in markets is everything. And short amounts of time, there's no guarantees of anything in markets. And short amount of time is even trickier. 2 years is a very short amount of time in a real estate market. Very short. It takes, like, look at what's happening right now in the market, like what went on for 2 years, and then now we're in this sort of declining phase, and it's not happening like overnight. We're still in the middle of it, right?
Right.
Same thing with the stock market. It's like it goes down like slowly and then quickly. You know what I mean? It's not like it happens like all at once. So time is part of this. So if you think that you're going to buy any piece of real estate, it doesn't really matter what it is, and be able to recoup all of the money or not run into issues, you know, while you're the owner of that property, and then come out of it whole in 2 years' time, that's a kind of a gamble,
Yeah.
right? Because there's costs involved with buying real estate.
Sure.
And you've talked about this on your blog. We talk about this with all of our clients too. It's like when you buy a place, if you're getting a loan, there's all the loan fees involved with it. You have to pay the sales tax if you're buying in DC or any jurisdiction. Then when you sell it, if you're going to use a broker, hopefully, obviously one of us, you're going to use a broker, you're going to pay a commission, you're going to pay another tax, and whatever cost it is to set the house back up or the property back up. I mean, all that stuff factors in,
Yeah.
you know?
So would you say even 5 years to be in a condo might not be long enough?
5 years, I guess there was some stat or data that said that the recuperation time for the purchase price of any property in DC was around 4 to 5 years
Interesting.
on average.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So maybe if you bought something in 2019 and you wanted to come sell it in 2021, you hit the lottery. But over time, that, you know, it reverts to the mean.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
But there's no guarantees, right? So go ahead.
Mine will be a little bit shorter and sweeter, but
Oh, sorry. You know, you give me
I like
no,
the
you give me a
PhD
soapbox,
version.
and then,
Yeah.
you know, right? Okay.
But no. So for me, because I do think that the market for condos is very soft right now. So again, I think it's buying smart. You buy low, sell high. I don't know what Warren Buffett's saying is. You guys know it. It's
When the tide goes out, you'll see who's not wearing any underwear. Like what was that one?
no Warren. It's definitely not that. It's
the one I sent about greed and
it's great. It's like
Oh, when people are greedy, be fearful, and when they're fearful, be greedy.
greedy. Yeah.
Yes.
So when people are
Yes.
fearful, be greedy. So like the market in general is soft on condos.
Mhm.
Like if you look at City Center, I think City Center's a great buy. I mean,
yeah.
downtown DC will bounce back. So if you look at the pendulum, not necessarily in the condo market, but during the pandemic, you were looking to pay 20% plus on homes,
Mhm.
right? Something's listed for $1 million, you got to be prepared to go to 1.2 or even 1.3. Where now we're telling our buyers the market's soft, sellers might be more vulnerable, maybe they're not, but go in and ask 10 or 20% off of list price.
Wow.
So that's like a 30 or 40% swing. Fee simples, you aren't going to see that as much. But I
Mhm.
do think in the condo market, if something's listed for 500,000,
Mhm.
why not go in and offer like 4.25, try to get it done at 450? My take is, to Max's point, you need to resell it for about 10% higher just to kind of recoup the
Mhm.
cost into and out of the transaction. That's just a rough number.
Mhm.
So that means they'd have to sell it, if they picked it up for 450, they'd have to sell it for close to 500. So why can't we sell it for 599 and like 25 or 26 when the market should be better?
Interesting.
So pocket that cash. If you're renting, you're 100% paying interest anyway. So just,
yeah. So you're saying, Brent's saying go for it, get the condo, and Max, you're saying hold off, get the house.
No, I didn't
No.
say that.
Okay.
And I also remember the quote is when the tide goes out, you'll find out who's been swimming naked. That's the quote. Okay.
Oh.
All right. So that's not what I said.
Okay.
But I'm not saying I didn't say that either. Do you see how I'm like a politician here?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
you're
Very
very good.
diplomatic. Yeah.
We just had
Um,
election day a couple of weeks ago. You should have
right?
ran for mayor.
No, I'm practicing for next one. So what I'll say is, it also depends on what your overall real financial goals are. And also what kind of property you want. How do you want to deal with living in any property? If you go to rent a property and you're okay with dealing with the aspects of being a renter, whatever that can be.
Mhm.
Like, let's say you want to rent in pick a rental building in DC, right? A popular rental building. They're not without their issues either, like
Sure.
dealing with like the day-to-day BS of the management or other tenants there, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you go rent from an independent landlord, like, are they going to take care of the property and, help maintain things? And is it going to be like a nice place to live versus purchasing the condo where you should have a little more control over that
Mhm.
environment?
Mhm.
So if that's important to you, then you're a purchaser,
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you also have to know, well, I guess going a step further, you have to know the buyer profile. And on a very macro level, like my answer, it is what it is, like buy the condo. But again, you want to find out more information, right? You do have to do a little bit more due diligence. Like, is it a young couple that plan to have a baby in the next like 9 months? And if you're looking at a 1-bedroom, then they're probably going to outgrow that space pretty quickly. So you want to do a little bit more due diligence to find out what the end goal is for the buyer. But if it's just what it is, they're going to be there by themselves for a couple of years, then be aggressive and just try to find some low-hanging fruit, a desperate seller,
Yeah.
and get in one of these good buildings. And you want to hire good representation. Like, don't buy a good deal in a bad building or a bad neighborhood, because you still might not recoup your cost. But there's some really good deals out there. Like, I keep going back to City Center, but like that building is going through some challenging times right now, where there's I think
I
there's
just saw a contract in there for like a pretty decent unit for under $1.5 million. I think that was a pretty low number on per square foot basis for
So
that.
it's a good time to buy in City Center. Some of these other like luxury buildings, because for the last 2 years, people have been moving to fee simple and kind of moving out of the burbs and not getting into like the economics of what's going on in inner cities. But there's that side of the equation as well
Yeah.
that are driving people to the burbs.
Yeah, no, and I agree with both of you. I think that despite rates being up, there's a lot of opportunity right now and deals to be had. So I would love to hear y'all's opinion on, what should buyers be asking for right now? Like, what will get them excited to pursue a transaction? What kind of low-hanging fruit is out there, either from credits from the seller or, like you said, particular properties?
Well, it's, again, situational, but I'll give an example. I had some buyers, we were looking at some condos in Northeast DC, and on this one block, there are 10 new units just on that one block in this neighborhood. And to be honest, like, all the units were pretty nice.
Yeah.
Like, the construction was decent in both buildings. The product, like, it was attractive, and I just straight up told them, I said, someone's going to have to blink first here. You know, they got to get one of these under contract. Two separate developers, but someone's got to get something under contract to get the ball rolling. And it's not happening rapidly right now. I mean, the agent might tell you, a listing agent for a property like that might say like, oh yeah, you know, we're getting showings and stuff. I'm sure there are people out here, there are buyers in the market, but someone's got to pull the trigger. So I said, just go ahead and, you know, just let's go in below asking with a credit. And they were really surprised that I said that. I was like, what do you have to lose? I mean, if for some reason the developer says no, or let's say another buyer materializes on the same day and offers them their asking price, there's another unit next door. In fact, there are 9 units next door.
Right.
Okay, so if you don't get that one, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And you know, they were game for that. Why wouldn't they be?
Yeah.
And that's just, well, again, one example.
Right, and that wouldn't have been an option 6 months ago.
Probably not. Just because, again, that low interest rate environment was intoxicating, right? Because you're like, wow, this payment's so low. I mean, the payments were very low on a lot of the stuff, especially the condos in that like under $1 million range.
Yes.
And now they are not. Those payments are not low.
So for me, I think you want to find out more from the buyer.
Yeah.
So it's what motivates you as a buyer. And it's, to me, it's like one of 3 things. They're either looking at the rate solely, which you can do some buy downs or credits to buy the rate down from the seller, or they're just a payment shopper. So it's like, how much are they going to be putting out a month? They're going to be based, their sole decision based on their payment. Or 3, which is the boat I'm in as a buyer, it's just price.
Yeah.
Like, as I think that there's opportunity out there for buyers, doesn't matter if it's an end user that's looking to buy their first home, second home, investment property, there's opportunity to get a really good deal. And that's what excites me. And I think we as agents have to kind of spin the bottle here back to the buyers and give them excitement, right? It's like, now's a good time to buy. Who cares about the rate? You know, we've had people on the podcast, date to rate, marry the house, which I think is great advice because you can refi in 2, 3, 4 years into something lower. This is probably not your dream house. You're going to be here forever. So get a really good deal, get a really good price on the place, and then just refi out of it in 2, 3, 4 years. So it's our job to kind of give them that excitement.
Yeah. For sure.
But even saying all that, you know, which is all extremely logical and makes sense, it's still very tough to get people off the fence.
Is. Well, sometimes, again, when we're talking with our buyers, and we sometimes get egg back on our face, it's like, I think the market's going sideways. 23 is going to be worse than it is in 22. And I'm like, now is the time to buy. To Max's point earlier, who cares? All for 20% off. It's on the market for $1 million, all for 800. What are they going to come back and say? No. You don't know what their position is until you make the offer. Put pen to paper and let the seller decide yay or nay.
Yeah. So given, I think somebody asked me this question, that what are the pros and cons to the different things you can ask for? So she was asking, is it better to ask for the seller to buy down your rate? Is it better to get help with closing costs? Is it better to just get the overall price down?
All of the above.
Ask for everything.
Ask, why not?
Now's the time.
I like you started off what you were saying in your last answer about just like you're a price person. That's an interesting approach. Just say like, get the price as cheap as possible, because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to sell it, and there's gonna be a net on the other side of this, right? Sure. But why not just go for a combination of things? Get the price down. Obviously, get the price down if you can. If there's more money to pull out of that, to maybe get a rate a little bit lower, a point lower, save some money on your monthly payment. If that's available, just ask.
Yeah.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I might be thinking about this the wrong way, but I would think out of those 3 things, what would be most appealing to me is to get the rate bought down, because that would affect, you know, the entire course of the loan. But is that the wrong way to look at it?
I'm not going to tell a buyer that's the, again, I think you have to look at the complete financial picture, but a rate is just exactly that. I think that can change over time. You can do a 2-1 buy down, you can do a 5-1 arm or whatnot. But it's like, to me, the number one thing is price, because that's something that you're locked into. To Max's point, you can't change that. You can't change that down the road. It's like the price is what it is and what you paid for it. So I think sometimes buyers get so caught up in the rate's 7.5%, it's 8%. It was 2.5%, 2 years ago. But it's like, don't get so caught up in that, because now you can maybe get 40% off the price from where it was. Again, going 20% over list. Now you can go 20% below list. That's a 40% swing in the data there. So you just have to kind of relook at the numbers.
You have to look at those numbers, and you have to assess what affordability is to you as a borrower, as a buyer. You know, what makes sense.
Yeah.
If you have enough cash to put into X, and you know, with the price and the LTV where it all makes sense for you, and then ask for a rate buy down, sure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can, like I said, go at it with, you know, from both sides, with the price, with some credit. You know, there's lots of different ways to do it. Now, I will say that, especially with new condos, right? With new condos, you are dealing with an individual seller, a developer, or some kind of person on the other end of it, or a group. Not everyone's going to respond the same way. So as a buyer, you certainly have to be ready for any answer, right? Just like I said, that agent was like, "Oh, I didn't say this. I'm sorry." Part of making that offer to that agent with the new condos was, at first when I sent her the offer, she was like, "Am I supposed to take this seriously?" And I said, "Yeah, yes, you are." And I mean, you know, I'm trying to be collegial, and I'm trying to be professional. And I'm not, but I'm representing a bona fide qualified buyer. You have 6 units to sell. In just one block, there's 10 units. So you better take this offer seriously.
Yeah.
You know?
So do you think that there's still a problem in DC with supply?
It depends on what you're looking for. Right? Brent?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think it depends on which market you're talking about. If you're looking for a fee simple house on Edgemoor, I think there's maybe one on the market. If you're looking for fee simple in other sub markets, it could be challenging. But if you're looking for a condo, there's a ton of condos out there.
Tons.
Yeah, and I feel like that was the case even during the pandemic. There was always a better supply of condos.
Yeah, well, they're still building tons of stuff out here. They're converting things, which is honestly, and some, you know, on my social media, you might get this too, I don't know. On my social media, if I'm putting like new condos on TikTok or new condos on Instagram, I always get these comments. Again, I realize it's social media, so it's like I don't take everything so seriously. But I get the comments of like, "Oh, this is gentrification," or "They should have left that the way it was," or whatever. But there isn't enough housing. So how else do we do things in Washington, D.C., where like the lots are smaller, the buildings are smaller, there's height restrictions. You have to split these up. They have to become multiple units.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they're building more. There's going to be more stuff. There should be housing available. Housing should be more affordable. It's gotten very expensive, but that's how that happens.
And to point that you made earlier, I think that some people will pivot, like that house in Petworth. Like that person's not going to sell. They're going to rent their house, and they're going to go rent something else, so that you're shrinking the inventory, so the absorption rate goes down. I mean, I haven't seen a strong uptick. I think it's been relatively flat through the last 3 months. If you compare us to like Austin, Texas, Raleigh, North Carolina, Phoenix, those markets have seen almost a double uptick in their inventory. We're not seeing that.
Oh, interesting.
So and I think that it could even constrict a little bit more if more and more people decide they're not willing to budge on the price. We're just going to go to the rental side. So the spring market, I think, will be very interesting to see what happens.
Interesting.
And I think we're always speaking from like the other like micro market of being in DC. The real estate market is always directly tied to the job market.
Yeah.
Job market in DC is steady.
It's very strong.
Yes. Yeah.
I read a report earlier this morning. I think we were like number 2 or 3 in the country for job market growth.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I mean, it's the federal government and everything that serves that, attorneys. These are jobs that don't like just disappear.
Right.
So that has a lot to do with it.
Okay, so I'll tell you an anecdote. So every weekend I go to open houses and I talk to agents and we talk about the market, and so many of them have said, "Oh, well, if you could just find a place that's on the market that has an assumable mortgage, like that's what you should be going after." But like, there's no good way to find those. I guess, I mean, if you have an agent that's really tied in and talking to other agents constantly and knows for a fact that their seller has a mortgage that's assumable. But I guess, yeah, just to talk a little bit about how you take on an assumable mortgage and how you find a house where that's an option.
I mean, if a listing agent has a property and the seller has an assumable mortgage, VA financing is assumable. I think FHA is as well. Maybe there's a random conventional loan sitting out there.
There's a random conventional.
There might be a random one, but that has to be advertised and marketed. I mean, you have to market that, like, that should be like your top line in your advertising, in your remarks, so that people see it first. Because, I don't really think there is an easy way to figure that out.
No.
Who is people? I'm just curious, because we had that exact situation on a house down at Potomac Yards where I think it was $600,000 loan, assumable at 2.65 interest rate. But it's like, do you put that in the top of, as an agent, you put it at the top of the consumer remarks and or just
Both.
at the top of the agent remarks?
I would put it in both. It's not always going to be realistic for every buyer to deal with the assumable loan. Like, especially if there's a equity differential there.
Right.
Because I have one right now that has an assumable VA loan. A conventional buyer can assume the VA loan. It has ramifications for the original VA borrower, the seller. He doesn't have his eligibility. It affects his eligibility for getting future VA loans until that loan is removed from that property.
Oh, interesting.
But he seems to be game for this if the right person comes along and qualifies. However, the delta between what they're asking for the house and actually, what close to what they paid for it and what's left on that loan is kind of, it's a lot. It's not like an exorbitant down payment, but for that type of borrower who would have qualified for that loan 2 years ago, that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
They probably don't have that money.
Well, like, explain how it works. Like, the buyer's on the hook for the difference?
The buyer's definitely on the hook for the difference. It's just like making any standard down payment, but it's probably going to be even more than a standard down payment because, again, if they bought the house for a lower price, they financed it, they've been making payments on it, so the principal balance has come down over a course of whatever it is, 12 months, 24 months, 36, the principal's come down. And so in that case, it's like roughly $300,000 difference. And $300,000 for, a lot of buyers in DC for that category of property, 1.2 million, 1.3 million, it's a considerable amount of money. A lot of people wouldn't have that saved.
With that in cash?
Yes.
$300,000 cash on top of your down payment?
That is the down payment.
That is the down payment. It's all
but then
inclusive.
plus your fees and all that kind of stuff.
That's a lot.
So in our situation, it was roughly $600,000, $1 million property. So the delta was $400,000. So if you assume the loan at $600,000, you're putting 20% down. You still got to have a delta of $200,000 that you have to get a second on.
But I don't think there are.
It's challenging.
It is challenging. I mean, I was talking to.
Because then that lien holder is in the second position. God forbid.
Sorry for this. Sorry for the speculative level, conversation here. But I was talking to a couple loan officers, and I don't know that there's like the difference money loan out there, right?
Oh.
So if you're assuming a loan, and it's a larger than a 10% or a 20% difference, which would be your normal down payment category, then I don't know that there's extra money out there to borrow against the property to make up the difference. That's what makes it a little tricky.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a great thing, but there's a lot of details involved.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize that.
They don't realize that. And again, this is also a new territory for folks like Brent and me, because when assumable
I've never done
loan,
assumable loans.
You've never?
Well, I've never done an assumable loan.
Oh,
I've never done a deal with an assumable. I mean, finished a deal with an assumable loan. No.
Twice, and this kind of parlays into another segment of the financing, but twice in my career we've done seller financing, and we're working on. We got rejected one last week, seller financing.
What do you mean rejected?
The seller just said no.
Okay.
We offered 50% down and financing of seller note back 50%. Seller said no.
They just said no way.
A similar situation we're into now. So it's just a matter of, in that exact situation, depending on the seller's wealth behind the scenes, could they take back a note for 20, 30% of the purchase price?
Or take back another note.
Right. So it's like, in our case, again, $600,000 assumable at 2.65. And then the buyer puts 20% down. That goes directly to the seller. And then the seller is also in a position to lend money. Let's say it's 36 months, 5% interest.
How complicated is this getting?
Yeah.
There's actually a form in there, because I just did one yesterday. It's a very short one-page form.
The seller financing
The
form?
seller financing
Yeah.
form. It's almost like, is this even legit? But everything is backed
well,
up by
it's
like
legit if
Fannie
the
and
note
Freddie.
gets signed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
right.
Yeah. So, I mean, based on that, I feel like the best opportunity for sellers right now is to, if they don't have a lot of cash, is to go after a property that.
You mean buyers?
Yeah, buyers, sorry. To go after a property that maybe the seller is willing to negotiate more and try to get the seller to buy down your rate rather than going this assumable
Much easier.
Yeah,
mortgage
much easier.
route. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, if there's if something happens to have an assumable mortgage on it, and it's advertised, and you're a buyer and you're lucky enough to qualify in that category, that narrow category,
Yeah.
great.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of rare.
Yeah.
It becomes a math game too. Even if you're doing seller financing, and let's say it's $1 million deal, and you're asking the seller to hold back any paper, it becomes a math equation where the seller, it's going to be favorable on their terms, right? Yes,
Mhm.
certainly they might be in the first lien position or second, but instead of paying $950, maybe you end up having to pay $1,025,000, and you're also paying interest over the course of whether it's whatever you negotiate, 24 months, 36
Mhm.
months.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have to, it could get tricky.
Yeah.
Today, our guest is Jamie Manning from Exposed Brick DC. Jamie's been our guest a couple times before this, and Jamie runs one of the most successful blogs for real estate in DC, perfectly curated real estate blog. We love it. So we're talking about financing here. We were talking about assumable mortgages, the rarity,
Mm-hmm.
seller financing.
Yes. So I think what I'm interested in figuring out is how to get buyers excited about this current market. And I think seller financing is one thing that they could get really excited about, but I have no idea how you go about doing it.
So it's pretty straightforward. Literally, the seller would be the one financing the deal. So ideally, the purchaser would make some kind of down payment, probably 20%, so that there's enough money there to get some equity into the seller's pocket and also pay all of the fees involved with the transaction, the brokerage fee, the taxes, etc. And then basically hold the rest of the money for the deal, the seller.
Mm-hmm.
And then the buyer would make the financing payments directly to the seller for a period of time, 24, 36 months. Then there would be a balloon payment at the end. So meaning that it has to be refinanced at some point with a standard conventional mortgage or VA or FHA or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a way for the buyer to potentially save money by if the rates are at 6.5% or 7% right now from the bank, and the seller's willing to do something like 5%. That's a huge savings.
Mm-hmm.
There's no origination fees, or there shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a pretty big percentage difference in the rate.
And I think two questions we as buyer agents have to look at. One, we can do some legwork up front. You can go into land records and see if there's a note on the property, because to me, that's going to be number one ticker. If they have the property on for $1 million, they took out a note for $800,000 2 years ago, there's a good chance that they still owe money on that if you don't see
Mm-hmm.
the loan paid off. And then you just make the phone call before even writing up the offer to the other side. Hey, Mr. Listing Agent, would the seller be open to taking back paper,
Mm-hmm.
taking back seller financing? And then if they are, then you just write up the offer. But I don't know that you would go through the legwork of drafting up the offer, submitting it,
Sure,
not
no.
knowing out all the terms. So you want to have that conversation with the listing agent up front. But it's, again, if they own it free and clear, you don't know the other side's circumstances. Maybe they're very well off and they have, millions or billions of dollars in other accounts. And so it might be attractive for them to get 5% on $1 million for 3 years.
Yeah. To unload this property that they don't want anymore. Then
Right.
they're getting an interest payment, so it's like passive income,
Mm-hmm.
and then
They're
eventually
in the
they'll get
first
the rest
lien
of their money.
position too. So God forbid the buyer defaults on the loan, they can foreclose on the property and now they get it back.
Mm-hmm. But then after 2 or 3 years, there's a balloon payment, and so you have to go get a conventional loan and
Yeah.
pay the seller.
Or try to
completely.
retrade the property, or whatever.
Sneaky.
Well, right.
It's an
Yeah.
option.
It's an
Yeah.
op- it's a-
Yeah.
It's an option. And I had a listing recently. Minor frustration with the listing. It was an investment property for a client, and I'd been trying to sell it for quite a bit of time. And we finally got him. He was offering seller financing, like straight up. He owned the property free and clear and was offering seller financing. The investment income coming into the property was really substantial, and the financing was offering was also attractive. So like there was money to be made purchasing this property. Just being in a slower market, it was kind of like finding that right buyer was
Right.
tricky. Didn't matter what we were doing. Finally got a buyer. And we had it set up with a 20% down payment, 80% seller held at 5% for 3 years. And, the place was pretty much ready to be completely leased out like that month. And he just stopped the whole thing. He was like, I'm going to hold it for 2 more years.
Oh
The
my
seller.
The
gosh.
seller. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
it just
And
pulled the rug out.
Yeah, I've actually heard more stories like that of sellers pulling out of deals because rates have gone up like during the time of the transaction. Then all of a sudden they can't afford to buy the place where
There
they
you
were
That's true
going to
too.
go.
Yes, indeed.
So that's crazy.
There's a lot of interesting stuff going on right now.
So
Mhm.
back to your story about the seller financing.
Mhm.
Did you advertise that in the MLS?
Yep.
Is
We
there-
advertised it big.
And I think there's a box that you can check, like FHA, VA,
Seller financing.
seller financing in there as well.
Believe so, yeah. So I
Interesting.
guess it's searchable to a degree, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if you can go into the search fields in MLS and find properties that
Then have seller
agents
financing.
have marked seller financing.
And so going back to that new condo project that we have coming up that everyone must rush to as soon as I bring it on the market and purchase all the units. So while I was doing the research for that a couple weeks ago, I was going through all the listings for the other new condos that are in this location, which there are probably like 4 or 5 dozen new condos around here in this area. And a lot of them were straight up advertising, like big bold letters, like offering incentives up front, making sure they were offering full co-op commission of 3%, and some of them were doing seller held notes too.
Interesting.
Now, not every developer can hold a note because
Right.
they have construction money out.
Correct.
But there's all kinds of stuff out there right now.
Interesting.
We're also seeing as listing agents, I know we're shifting topics here, but we're able to get some of our sellers to go above and beyond the full 3%, whether it's, and I don't know if we can talk about that online or not, but it's like,
Sure.
here's a $25,000 bonus. We got one of our sellers to offer a $50,000 bonus, which is almost 6% commission on that transaction. And it does generate some buzz. We had a lot of
Mhm.
calls, texts, emails, more showings come up, but we'll see how it plays out.
Well, so I always wonder about that when you see a seller offering like a huge agent bonus or something. Don't you feel like you owe that to your buyer if you're the buyer's agent? Like, because
No.
thank you.
No, because I think I would still negotiate the best. I mean, I might not end up getting it paid. Again, flipping the script. I'm the buyer agent. Let's say it's a $2 million property. I'm getting 6% commission. That's $120,000. That's what's on paper. But I'm going to probably still come in at 1.8, 1.9, something like that.
hmm
And then it's a matter of, all right, so then I get the counter back, and it's like, all right, we're going to agree to 1.9, but you're not getting that 50,000. I'm like, all right, so then that's when I'll be like, all right, I'll just eat the $50,000 bonus to
Yeah,
get my client
to get the
best deal.
deal. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, fair enough. I like
No.
no.
Holidays are around the corner. I got gifts to give out.
Tell me about it. Jamie Manning, thank you so much for coming out and visiting us again today.
Yes, thank you. So fun.
You weren't the exact subject of this conversation
No,
today.
no.
Like, it was kind of
It was
like
like a knowledge share.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But we're always here to answer questions to you and your audience and vice versa. We love interacting with you and
Mhm.
keeping everything in our real estate sphere. We love it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate
Love
it.
what you do. It's great.
Thank you.
Let's do some give her some rapid fire, and then we're gonna do some more free word association. We're gonna have some fun. Okay? You wanna give her some rapid fire questions?
Rapid fire.
All right.
I have to preface this because some of these are based on movies. You watch
Okay.
TV?
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see how it
Okay.
goes.
So, what are you currently binge watching?
What did we just finish? We just started watching How To with Jeff Wilson. Have you ever heard of
Is
this?
Jeff Wilson the guy from Bravo?
No, he's a comedian. Did you ever watch Nathan For You?
I've heard of this show, but I haven't watched
Yeah.
it yet. Nathan For You, for sure. I've seen Nathan For You.
So funny. We actually just started rewatching that. But How To with Jeff Wilson is similar to Nathan For You. It was produced by Nathan Fielder, and it's just kind of a quirky comedy type show. It's good.
Who would play you in a movie?
Oh my! Well, people think I look a lot like Kristen Stewart from Twilight.
Okay.
Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That might be perfect casting, actually.
Kristen Stewart.
Yeah.
Twilight. I was watching that the other day.
You're just watching Twilight again?
It came on and like the little kids, like, what's this vampire? And there was a kissing scene and not great parenting. On to the next question. 90210 or Saved by the Bell?
Neither. Is that an option?
That is an option. I'll have to strike that one through because I think that's reliving my childhood.
Is she too young for that? Maybe.
I think they had a remake of both, but I don't think the remakes are usually not as good.
Yeah. I think
Just
it's a
like
little bit
neither.
before my time. Okay, I can answer Seinfeld versus Friends. That's an easy one.
That's a good one too.
Seinfeld all the way.
Okay, Seinfeld versus Cheers.
Seinfeld.
Interesting.
You could say anything and I'd say Seinfeld.
Okay, so aside from the female aspect of that, which of the 4 characters would be you in real life?
That's a good question. Okay, I can eliminate Kramer and George. It would be between Elaine and Jerry.
Elaine and Jerry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jerry is completely neurotic, though,
Yeah.
in his
that's
own way. So,
And
They're all-
I love Elaine. Her comedic timing
unbelievable.
is unreal. Yeah.
yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is a genius.
Yes.
Last question. Are you going to see Jerry Seinfeld when he comes to DC?
No. Should I? When's he coming?
He's coming in January. I
February?
think-
February?
Or February.
Yeah.
Where?
Anthem, right?
At the Anthem. He's going to be here for 3 days. And there's still tickets left.
I might have to do that. Thanks
Yeah.
for the tip.
It's I saw him probably 6 years ago, I think at the Kennedy Center.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good.
Yeah.
Very clean. There's no
Uh-huh.
dirty raunchiness in the
Right.
show.
I watched his comedy special that came out like a year ago
Yeah,
or something.
there's a
It was
recent
good.
one.
Yeah.
And I think Adam Sandler is doing a tour now too. I saw him on Instagram and could have been something old, but he had a whole
He
crowd
ca-
behind him.
He hasn't been out doing stuff in a long time, right?
Well, he had what was it? A Netflix special probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
It was pretty good.
Okay.
Uncut
So-
Gems.
Uncut.
Yeah.
Uncut
Gems.
Gems.
Yeah, right. Uncut
Uncut
Gems.
Gems.
Bring that back. Don't.
That's all the questions I have for Rapid Fire, Max. Back
all right.
to you.
All right. I have our free word association. We've done
Okay.
this only once.
Only one time.
Okay, this is scary.
Okay.
You should be
Blog. All
scared.
right. So I'm just gonna I'm
Okay.
gonna give you a word and you just give me a word back.
Okay.
Blog.
Writing.
Coffee.
Gross.
Design.
Interiors.
Aesthetic.
Classy.
DC.
The best.
Housing.
Fun.
That's all I got.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I really like coffee. That's great.
Gross.
Gross.
I guess you don't drink. What do you drink?
Tea.
You're a tea
Decaf
drinker.
tea. Like a
Decaf
Hot
tea.
or iced tea?
decaf hot tea.
Hot tea.
Like an old woman.
Do you have cats?
No, I should have cats.
Wow.
I like to read, antique, drink tea, and write.
Do you really like the antique?
I do.
I do too.
Yeah.
When do you have time to antique?
If I go to West Virginia, there's
all
Lewisburg
yeah,
has a strip
enough.
of antique shops.
That's what you do in
That's
West
fun.
Virginia.
You go to antique
sure.
shops, yes.
All right. Well, Jamie, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks.
Any shout outs for any charities today?
Oh, okay. So last time I did Habitat for Humanity, I think. So I'll do Autism Speaks today.
All right. You got it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at KeyedInPodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.